He's someone who, that is very much part of his brand as a politician. From what I understand, that is the message that's been put out across the government communication service in anticipation of his transfer, is that they want government communications to be more authentic and to be more genuine. Not having a script helps with that. Sometimes when you have the lectern and you have the script, it's quite authoritative and it gives you gravitas, but it does put a barrier between you and the viewer.
Well, just half an hour or so ago, Andy Burnham made his first public comments as Prime Minister. There was lots of what the Americans call hopey, changey stuff on the steps of number 10 Downing Street. He put his own twist on the occasion by not speaking at a lectern. But the truth is, these Downing Street addresses, as a new PM prepares to enter through the front door, are grimly familiar to us all. They've happened quite a lot over the last decade, after all. But what makes for good political communication? And did Andy Burnham's first effort as PM score high? Well, joining me is Keelan Carr, a former special advisor at number 10 Downing Street and a speechwriter to Theresa May when she was Prime Minister. Keelan Carr, welcome to The Times at One. I hope you were able to catch Andy Burnham's first words as PM, and if so, what did you make of him?
I did, yes. I thought it was a good performance. As you say, there was no lectern, so that's immediately a different visual cue for people watching it compared to previous prime ministers. We've been used to seeing the lectern being put in place, speculations about whether the crest might be on it or not on it, and what that might have connoted. So immediately there was a visual there. Also, it was quite striking that the street was quite full of people, lots of faces behind him, sort of smiling and nodding. Sometimes when prime ministers appear, they can cut a slightly forlorn figure if they're the only person in front of the black door. So immediately it was quite a striking and arresting visual presentation. And then what he said, no notes, no text, speaking from the cuff. I thought maybe a little bit of nerves showing, but that's, you sort of expect that given the nature of the moment. And that probably adds to the sense of him being a sort of real person, a real human being, having that extraordinary moment. But yeah, it was. I think he'll be happy with how he performed, I think.
It was relatively short. It was, I don't know, 6 or 7 minutes long. It had a few lines in it that were a little bit memorable, like, his intention to sort of develop a circuit breaker for Britain. He talks again, as he has in the past, about political power being over-centralised, the economic power being privatised, over 40 years of neoliberalism, which he clearly intends to reverse in important ways. But there wasn't very much specific, and I guess we shouldn't be surprised by that.
I think that's right. There was a couple of sort of watch this space lines. So we learned he's going to have a 10-year plan later this year. We learned that from tomorrow there's going to be measures announced on the cost of living. But you're right. It didn't seem to be a policy heavy speech. I think when you've got a speech off the cuff without a text, you're never absolutely sure whether every line has been delivered as intended. If you're reading from a script, then you start at the beginning and work through to the end. When it's on the cuff, it may have been that he had some points that he wanted to make but didn't make. But I think with a speech like this, it's the first speech you make as Prime Minister. It's the one speech where everyone's really watching, the whole world's hanging on every word. You want to make sure that every word counts. You want it to be reasonably short. If it's short, that means that it gets probably taken in full by the broadcasters, which means they don't edit anything out and all your words get put across. So I think he'll have obviously given it a huge amount of thought. He'll have been rehearsing it. I think we'll all now spend the next sort of 24 hours, passing it and waiting for the next set of announcements.
Does he come across as authentic? You worked with Theresa May. I think it's fair to say she probably wasn't the most natural communicator in the world. Also fair to say Keir Starmer was not the most natural communicator in the world. Part of the skill is looking and feeling authentic. Does he have that?
I think it's interesting that he's slightly of a different generation from Theresa May and Keir Starmer, and I think he is from perhaps a slightly more tech savvy generation. He's probably a bit more used to sort of social media world that we're living in now. I think he does come across as authentic. He's someone who, that is very much part of his brand as a politician. From what I understand, that is the message that's been put out across the government communication service in anticipation of his transfer is that they want government communications to be more authentic and to be more genuine. Not having a script helps with that. Sometimes when you have the lectern and you have the script, it's quite authoritative and it gives you gravitas, but it does put a barrier between you and the viewer. So obviously he's made deliberate decisions not to go down that line. He is, one of his strengths as a politician, I think, is that he is personable and he communicates a sense of authenticity. Now, whether or not that authenticity is itself a carefully contrived persona is another question. But even if that is the case, I mean, it's quite an artificial thing to be standing in front of a microphone giving a speech. That is an odd situation. So, in a sense, you have to put on a persona, and if your persona is one of authenticity, then that's all the better.
Just a quick final one. How important, Keelan, are first impressions? Because many people won't know Andy Burnham well, if at all, and now he's got a chance to make a first impression. How important is that? Does it get baked in pretty quickly?
I think it is. I think it is important. As you say, there are lots of people who don't follow the twists and turns of politics in the way that some of us do. So they will be interested to see this speech. If they see it on the television, they'll turn the volume up. They'll maybe tune into the news to watch it. It's also very important within the Whitehall setting because the whole of government, every department, permanent secretary, director, press officer will be watching that speech and they'll be taking their cues from it. Theresa May's first speech in Number 10, that was printed out and put on a frame and put on the wall. So it is the marching orders. Quite interested to see the things he picked out there. For example, the point around homelessness. That now means that anyone working on homelessness policy across the government for the next period of time will be able to point to the fact that the PM said in his very first speech that it was a priority. That means it's going to be a priority going forward, and anything that is in that first speech, becomes the marching orders for Whitehall.
Keelan Carr, thank you very much for your insights. Keelan Carr, their former speechwriter to Theresa May when she was Prime Minister.